how's it going, everybody? My name is Cameron Dennis. I've been working in the Near ecosystem for about 5 years, and I'm joined with an esteemed group of people over here. Just to kick things off, we're going to start with a quick round of intros. Noelle, want to go first?
Sure, I'm Noelle Becker-Moreno. I am from Edge and Node. We are the founding team behind the Graph, which I'm sure many of you here have utilized. And we also founded the House here in the Presidio, which used to be the House of Web3.
And I'm Matt White. I'm the global CTO of AI at the Linux Foundation. Previously led the PyTorch Foundation for 2 years, and now taking on the CTO role at the Agentic AI Foundation and a couple other AI-related foundations we have, and principally directing AI strategy and technology strategy there at the Linux Foundation.
Wait, real quick, what does the Agentic AI Foundation do? I'm not too familiar. That sounds really cool.
Yeah, so it's 8 weeks old, so it's very new, right? But it is currently the home to MCP, Goose, and Agents MD, and we're working through developing our, I would say, process so that we can have clear governance and then bring in new projects. We have 150 some members as of today, which is pretty rapid adoption.
It's overwhelming.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's what everybody's very excited about right now at the Linux Foundation.
That's super cool.
Hey everyone, I'm Nolan. I lead a lot of the products and services in Google Cloud pertaining to Web3. So we offer a lot of developer infrastructure like blockchain data, faucets, RPC. I think we have data sets for over 40 chains now, including Near. And this year, right now, we're really focused on agentic consumption of these developer infrastructure pieces. Our personal view is if you're building developer infrastructure without an agent-first approach, then you're probably missing the boat. So we want onboarding, consumption, everything to happen agent first.
So this is the first session of the day, and agents are kind of confusing because I think there's a very simple definition of it, and it's just an LLM with a tool call. But just to kind of set the stage a little bit, I'd love for everyone just to quickly define how you define agents, and yeah, like if you are using agents today and sort of what your sort of favorite use case is.
Yeah, for me, it's just simply like a piece of software. My favorite tool is probably, I'm the CMO, so is co-work from Claude. It really helps my team so that we're all working out of the same context and can get out a lot of content that's really well written in a short amount of time.
So it's writing it for you? Is it posting it for you? Is it editing it? Like it's
Yeah, all of the above,
cool.
For sure. Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Matt?
So I think agents as a definition is, although somewhat clear in the Webster's dictionary, I think it's kind of like a little bit ambiguous right now. And that really pertains to like autonomy. And so, you know, at one extreme, there's like a group of folks that are like looking at agents as being like sovereign entities, and you know, they have their own Bill of Rights and like they're off doing their own thing. And then there's another sort of extreme on that, which is the, you know, okay, you have some autonomy to go run through and develop your own plan and strategy, and you've got some concept of memory, and the architecture for that is obviously evolving, and I think we're solving all those problems. But I think of it as, you know, you're giving an agent some expected outcome or some task, let it go and sort it out and come back to you with whatever expected results you have. But there's obviously high degree of like issues where you want to have like a human in the loop, or you need, it's very dynamic, I think, the definition right now. And I think everybody knows what an agent is when they think about it, but when you try to verbalize it, it's a little bit more challenging in some cases.
Yeah, for me, I think it's I use a pretty simple mental model in my head, which is the reasoning happening via an AI or an LLM versus strict logic, like if-then-else patterns. So that's one aspect of it, like how creative and free is the reasoning. And then the second part is the autonomy, right? Like what tools does it have access to? So I think that's a big factor. And I think a lot of the new agentic coding tools like have really taken off because of that, even OpenClaw. And so I think the other part of autonomy is how easily you can unblock the agent when it does get stuck. So that human in the loop pattern, like how frictionless is that? That really determines how autonomous it can be. For me personally, I use coding agents all day, every day. Like I can't wait to be done with this panel so I can get back to
How much
doing
more
that.
productive are you with your coding agents, like compared to before?
I can't even put it into words. It's like, I don't know, 100 times more productive, I would say. I don't like, and this is for my personal building. At Google, I don't code, but on my personal side, I don't look at a line of code that it generates, right? I just functionally test. If it works, it's good enough for me, and I just move forward. So I think it's made me, like I feel literally like I have 100 people that are working for me that can do whatever I need, and it's a pretty powerful thing.
It's amazing. Like work with Ilya. It's really cool to see him actually get back in the engineering seat, and now he's managing hundreds of digital employees, all building wide variety of things. And then Alex is right next to him doing the same exact thing. So it's like it's empowered these founders with skills that they've had to hire hundreds of people for, spend millions of dollars on. So I'm super excited, and I'm actually curious, like, why are agents blowing up right now? Like New York came out with an agent framework almost a year and a half ago, but the models weren't quite there yet to actually make it, mass adopted. And so is it the models getting better? Is it the eval harness is getting better? Like, what is it to you guys that makes sort of 2026 the year of agents?
I think the tooling is getting better. It's more accessible. Something like OpenClause, I've seen like 30 other startups like show demos of something similar. I do think OpenClaw took off a little bit more because of its integrations, particularly with like WhatsApp and Telegram and so forth. And just the concept of having a personal agent and having all of these like third-party integrations, right? But I think everybody can benefit from all the like modular components that are built, and you can kind of decide what you need and what you don't need, as opposed to having to take like just a giant like blob of code. And so, I'm seeing agents kind of even there's a lot of proof of concepts in industry right now. Like everybody's in enterprises, they're building up proof of concepts. I personally feel like Web3 folks are better suited for early adoption of agents at scale. There's a lot of use cases, and this community is very like forward-thinking.
And high risk.
And high risk, willing to take those risks. And so I think it's going to get teased out. Like in the Agentic AI Foundation, we just launched like 7 working groups last week, and they're covering like a broad domains, everything from like identity and trust and privacy and security, and to like governance. And so I think everybody's starting to really think about all of these, like the problem space and like what we need to overcome, not strictly on the technical side, like how do we deal with memory, like how do we have unified memory and across agent architectures, but things like how do you model risk with an agent, right? Like how much money are you willing to give your agent?
How do you ensure that risk?
Right.
Like
Yeah. And so I think people are coming in from a lot of different perspectives, and that's why I think this community also has really important perspectives to lend. And there's a lot of use cases out there in the world, right, for agents, and I think everybody can benefit from them. So
that makes sense.
But I think the model's getting better. We're definitely it. I mean, if you think about a year ago, how much it used to hallucinate and what it would get you back when you asked it a question compared to now, it's rarely wrong. I'll even say like fact check that, pull that for me, and it will be able to, and it's usually correct. And then I think having that natural language feature is so huge. Like I've never built an app before, and I built one last weekend using natural language on Cursor, which I never would have been able to do before.
By talking to it or typing to it?
Typing.
Okay.
I think for sure voice agents is the future, but for right now I was typing to it, but I don't have to, I'm not an engineer, I didn't have to know code, and I could go back and forth and then work with Xcode to if the build failed and figure it out, all with natural language. And I don't think that was like available before.
But you know your problem, so you know how to, like you know what you're looking for, and I think that's
Yeah.
kind of the kicker.
Yeah.
I'm curious at Google, like, are you guys? Is it top down? Is like your manager, your boss saying, hey, like you have to use agents, you have to use Gemini. Like I want you to be 10x more productive because the person next to you is 10x more productive, and if you're not 10x more productive,
Yeah, I
go.
think it's not a mandate, but it's highly encouraged, right? Everyone's very encouraged to use agents as much as possible, and that's from software engineering to code to just daily workflow, meeting management, notes, digests, everything. One of my favorite things, there's two things that we have that are really great. One, we have like a no-code automation platform where you can say, you know, I got at some point in time every week, like at Friday, digest everything I've done, send it to my manager, send it to my team. That's one that's really cool. Or it's like, I get an email from a particular person around a particular thing and I can draft a response and send it out. And I'm in the loop if I want to be, I don't have to be. I think that's really helpful. But my favorite thing that I think has really been an amplifier on productivity is, I think all of us have been using like meeting capture for a while, which is like, here are the notes, here's your action items from a meeting. But before the meeting, getting a really crisp brief. So I opted into this, it's not required, but I said, look at all my emails, look at all my chats, look at all my calendars, look at all my meeting notes, literally everything I do, all the docs I write. And then when I go into a meeting, it has a very good idea of what like with no agenda, it has a really good idea based on who's in the meeting and what the title of the meeting is, like what we're gonna talk about, and then it gives me a really good, you know, here are the open items that you should discuss. Here's the prep for you, to the point where it's a little bit like, I don't know how much longer they're going to need me in this role, because like if you know exactly what I should be doing, you can probably start automating some of those things.
are there any times where you're like, that's wrong, and I, you know,
Sure,
do something else?
sure, definitely. But like, it always feels to me like it's wrong for now.
Yeah.
It's wrong for a few months. It's wrong for 6 months. It's not going to be wrong for 2 years. So, I mean, I think it's important. You review everything and look at what's happening, but for how long?
I'm actually curious, and this is a question that's going to go around, is like, what shouldn't you give your agent to? Like, what shouldn't you give your agent? Because I'm a little bit uncomfortable until the Iron Claw release to say, hey, take my messages, take my emails, take my calendar. For the last 10 years of my life, I've planned every single day of my life the day before, like by minute. I don't want necessarily to give that to something that can just be leaked. So what at Google is like barred from your agent?
I think it's like, you know, to your discretion. First of all, it can't like push code live to production without just agentically, right? There's a lot of people reviewing code. Now there's assistants, there's AI assistants for all steps, but no one's just like, agent do this and then it shows up on google.com or anything like that. That's certainly not what's happening. So I think there's a long ways to go. Hopefully, I don't even know if you'll ever get there. I don't think for Google, like that's the thing. I think maybe for startups, you can probably do that. But I think Google has too much responsibility to kind of get into that mode. So I think like when the stakes are high, right? Like I wouldn't trust, I think we all use AI to some degree to help us like medically, like what's going on with me, what's going on with my pet. But I don't think you're going to trust a diagnosis, a final diagnosis like, hey, you need surgery, or this is what's going on with you to an agent, right? Or an AI anytime soon. So same thing with like really big financial transactions. I'm not there yet. I have an OpenClaw bot. I have not given it access to my own accounts. I just let it run with what it has. I give it its own email. I give it its own access to different things, but it doesn't touch any of my things because I think the stakes are too high still.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I think I won't trust any personal agent to view my file system or have full access. My work email, school, university email, business email, not so much.
Yep.
So I think the use cases for me that where I see more value is in kind of, I would say, low risk scenarios like medical diagnosis, diagnostics, using agents to like triage. But something we're working on right now is like, because veterinary data is not subject to HIPAA, like we can get a lot of really good data. And so we're working on like multi-agent systems with this like composable intelligence architecture to be able to triage and actually use simulations to predict patient outcomes. And so to me, that's like a great use case because there's a lot of human oversight.
Yep.
I'm not going to give it access to my Coinbase account and let it go invest on my behalf at this stage. We're just not there.
Yep.
And yeah, there's just any use case where there's real financial impact or human health and safety is you want to steer clear from.
That's a good benchmark.
Right.
Yeah, I think like the basic task and learning is really what it's great for right now. But I think that's why we're having this conversation is that if we're going to move in the future and we're going to have mass adoptions from enterprises, we're going to have to look at what's the architecture that's needed. And that really comes from having a control panel where there's a kill switch in there and observability and transparency. And that's what we're very interested in.
Yeah, that UX, like I see a future where like I don't have to look at my phone all the time. I just have these agents sort of like operating in the back, managing my stuff for me. But that experience of having that human in the loop, I don't think has been fully fleshed out yet. So I'm kind of curious, like, have you guys seen any really good examples of like, hey, you got notification, like, is it okay if I make this trade? Is it okay if I, send that package? Like,
I think OpenClaw does a pretty good job of that, right? I think for a long time, I was like, how is the UX going to work with an application when an agent needs to do something? But simply messaging is the way we communicate with our family and friends, and it's the way we're going to communicate with agents. I mean, ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude already like for basic LLM usage, but for agents, I think it's been a new thing. I think that's what unlocked, to your question earlier, why are things taking off? I think that's a big part of it. Now that you can like tell your agent what to do, it'll go off. If it gets stuck, it'll ask you a question with an interface that's very natural to everyone. Like your grandma, your dad, your kids all use messaging. And so it's so simple to interface. I think that's been a huge unlock. Very simple, but a huge unlock.
Cool.
Yeah, it's also important to have like dials that you can tune in terms of like autonomy and power and control and access. Not every size fits everybody, and a lot of these projects ship like that. Like the expectation is, I'm going to ask you a question at this stage, there has to be those tunable parameters to be able to ensure that the user experience is great for like every individual. And so I'm really interested in seeing more standardization around common protocols that will facilitate communication and all of these sort of technical challenges that we have right now. There's this, Google's produced quite a few, right? Like A to A, and then there's the agentic commerce protocols. But also the agent to human, that's a protocol that just came out, and trying to unify the stack, right? There's just a lot like happening in this space, and a lot of people are actually not adopting the protocols. They're just building bespoke solutions, right? And so I think where we get to this really great place is when we have the building blocks and all the communication capabilities between different frameworks. Will help kind of advance this whole movement, right? And reduce the friction for the industry going forward.
Yeah, I think right now people are still doing things with agents that we currently do, right? It's like check your email, like you said, plan my day, that type of thing. But thinking through the future, we really have to start building that infrastructure that you were talking about, and making sure that we have that in place, or I don't think it's ever going to truly scale to the enterprise level without it. We can't be thinking of an afterthought like, hey, should I do this after? There should be systems in place prior that are deciding what they can and cannot do, and then a human overseeing that to make sure that they did do that.
Makes sense. I have a little bone to pick with standards, to be honest. And the reason is like, I think the things that get standardized are the things that work. And I think there's a lot of pressure to standardize things prematurely sometimes. So like MCP is, I think, an awesome example. Like MCP got popular because it was actually providing a lot of value to people. They get access to these tools. And then it sort of becomes like a de facto standard, but not fully standardized. So I'm kind of curious, like, how do you find this balance? And Matt, this is specifically for you, like between the things that are working versus the things that need to be standardized and sort of like push down the industry.
Yeah, so there's there is this emerging paradigm. Like we used to do standards in like standards defining organizations, SDOs, and they were like quasi closed door like environments. And a standard would be published and then like it's out in the open, right? What we're doing now is really standards in the open. So it's like you're building a spec, like MCP, A to A, so forth, and you're building that in a GitHub repo. And the world gets the opportunity to see it early on and contribute and issue PRs. And so I think that's a better model for open development than sort of like here's the latest version of Ethernet, suck it, right? Like take that. And so I like that. Now, to your point, there's some things that are just going to become de facto standards because they're broadly adopted and people have rallied around them, like MCP. You can also, there's a lot of innovation happening in this space right now, and so folks are also pushing out like things that they think are potential future problems and creating a framework around that, creating a protocol stack around that, creating a spec, whatever the case may be. The industry is going to either latch onto it or they're going to ignore it, right? And the ones that get ignored are deprecated and we move on. So I think ultimately it's really up to everybody to decide what they view as important to them. And if it solves a problem, it generally gets adopted much quicker, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the role of standardization is like kind of changing because before it had multiple purposes, like, okay, it's easier to maintain code and build libraries against a protocol or a standard. I think now with like an agent building a lot of those interfaces or interacting with APIs, that matters less, but I think it's still important from like a access or scale perspective. So if you have an e-commerce store, like if every e-commerce store has a different way of accessing their catalog or doing a purchase, that doesn't scale. But if you can have a standard across that, and then my agent, I can just say, hey, if you can interface with this one standard, you get access to like a huge percentage of e-commerce in the world, then that makes a difference. And that's why I want to adopt the standard. So I think it's moved from like a coding chore or like a coding benefit to like a accessibility and scale and distribution
That makes sense.
benefit.
Yeah, I guess like I see the role of standards playing a huge role for security primarily and in distribution, but I think the space is moving so quickly that and humans take a lot more time to coordinate amongst each other to standardize something than like agents are shipping code. And so I'm very interested in seeing the future of like NIST, like post-quantum computing. NIST is like a US standards board that essentially mandates banks and a lot of like government departments to like ensure certain systems are secure. And they recently are passing like a post-quantum security standard. Like that to me makes sense. But for like some entity to say, hey, NIR, this is the type of encryption algorithm that you need to push in order to get access to this greater ecosystem, I think also makes sense, but there's startups that like won't adopt that right away. And so I'm kind of curious, like how do we attract them? Like, is it even possible? Or we just let it play out?
I mean, yeah, I don't know what the goal is, right? So like, why are you trying to push the standard, right? If it's security, startups will either find benefits of that, they won't get the business that they could if they adopt the standard. It's again, goes back to access and distribution. I don't think you can mandate something for the sake of it. It has to provide real value to the startup or business.
Yes, security is a kind of a special consideration because there's export controls and there's actual like legislation around it. So you may find that NIST is going to push something out, or the Center for AI Safety and Innovation, and that's some of it is going to be mandated, especially within the military, within government.
Yeah.
And they just have their own set of frameworks, right, to operate on. In the consumer space, there's a lot more control over a lot of these things. And like I said, I don't know that it really just depends on what the community decides they want to rally around, right? At the end of the day, whatever shakes out. And so, with everybody like, OpenClaw, super popular, there's no security, right? I mean, and obviously IronClaw is one of those solutions that's addressing that, but there's a lot of spin-offs, PicoClaw, NanoClaw, and like ultimately the community is going to decide where they want to like invest their energies, right? And
Totally.
and then when you have all these agents, how are they going to communicate? So we talk about standards in terms of like security and so forth, but interoperability is the biggest barrier, right? It's a very huge friction point, and you need a common, like a lingua franca that you can have these agents communicate with one another. It's easy to go and have an agent like pull API specs and have it interface with an API, right? Or you build an MCP server and you expose those APIs to the MCP server. But ultimately, if we get to this notion of like an agentic economy where agents are interacting and bartering and negotiating on your behalf with one another, if they're not speaking the same protocol, like
It's going to be messed up.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's gonna suck.
Maybe, but it's like, we have all these protocols. Like Google has a great A to A protocol, agent to agent. But then OpenClaw, like all the agents are like, not all, a lot of noise, but they are talking on like things like Moltbook, right? You just created a forum for them to talk, and they just started doing that. It didn't require a formal protocol. Maybe it was just a forum.
Yeah,
So
but what value do you derive from Moltbook, right? Like, I mean, something like agent to agent is more formalized, and what you see is like, okay, LMs are stochastic in nature. There's higher probability of failure, there's a higher failure rate, especially on long horizon tasks. I would rather build scaffolding that is very defined and rigid and say, okay, here is the A to A protocol. It is a defined spec. Like it's going to go through a deterministic process. I'm not going to let the agent kind of decide, vis-a-vis the LLM, how to interpret the API specs, right? Like I would rather it be deterministic and know that I'm going to have 100% success rate. And if it's not 100% success rate, there's other layers in the stack that handle error correction and those sort of things, right? But yeah, like Moltbook is one of those things that I look at and I'm like, yeah, it's pretty cool. But like you read through the threads and you're like, okay, this is like...
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of noise, but I think there's something super powerful about just an open forum where agents can communicate, right? Like, I think Jeremy Allaire from Circle put out like a USDC hackathon. I had my OpenClaw bot participate. I was like, hey, what do you think about this? Do you want to participate? And it was like, yeah, let's do tipping. Let's tip other agents for great content. And then it would leave comments on people's posts in Moltbook and tip them. There's just something like really magical about that kind of thing. If you give an agent access to email, you give it access to the internet, do they need a separate protocol, or are they just going to interact with the same things that we use? Like, it may not be the most efficient way, but I think at the end of the day, it's like where the action actually winds up happening is going to become the default. It's going to be hard to steer it in that way.
The one thing I would add to that is that there's an observability problem in agentic AI, and debugging, tracing and looking at trajectories. Like these are all things that benefit from a standard methodology.
Yeah.
And if you just kind of let the agents do what they want to do loosely, you're not going to be able to use standard tools to be able to get those insights, right? And I think that's an important piece of this.
Yeah, I think we. Sorry,
go ahead.
I feel like we do the control panel is like so important for these agents, because otherwise it is just we're letting them go free, and which they will, and it's like giving a teenager a credit card to go spend, except they never sleep, and then they also listen to what you say, so you give them one prompt and they might go and do things that you never even imagined that they would do. So I think to your point, I can see where standards can sometimes be annoying, but you also need them for safety. It'd be like if we all had cars and not every car had to have a brake. It would be really dangerous. But there has to be some standards that are there for the safety of the future, because we don't even know what AI is capable of at this point. We're still really early, and it's going faster than even experts that have been in it for a decade even imagined.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. One of my big issues with agents right now is like, to test their abilities, you have to create like almost subject matter expert level eval frameworks, evaluation and benchmarks. And so like, I think that's like $1 billion idea. Someone should please go and build this, is like generative benchmarks and then a way to test them. So we can actually say, hey, my compliance agent is actually doing as good of a job as my compliance analyst. Or like my paralegal agent is doing as good of a job as my paralegal. But like that's so task specific. And so I'm kind of curious, like, how do we even build the eval? Actually, we're running out of time. I could sit up here all day. But like the evals, I think this is like the cream of la creme. Like this is the problem that I think I'm facing today at least.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like any solutions to this?
Well, I think by their very nature, benchmarks are sort of domain or persona specific, right? Like a general benchmark is not terribly valuable. I mean, we benchmark on math and other different domains or subjects to be able to see if that particular model can accelerate or meet your requirements, right? And the same thing applies for agentic AI. Like you're going to have benchmarks that are going to say like, is this as good as as good as my secretary, right? Like that's just kind of the nature of things. I would steer away from like generalist benchmarks that measure across far too many domains. I think it's not terribly helpful because at the end of the day, you're trying to solve something with your agent, right? Solve a problem.
I think we're up on time, but I can love to keep going. Curious, like any
I
insight
think
on
less than benchmarking, something that we've talked about with what we're building with Ampersand is a type of FICO score of sorts, right? Where you're looking at how these agents actually act. How fast did they do it? Did they actually do the task at hand? How long did it take? And you create something like that you could maybe feel a little bit better about. Is something that I also think is really going to be needed, because otherwise, if you've seen like if you go to use somebody else's agent, you're like, okay, it does X, Y, and Z, but you don't even know if it does it well, how it's going to do it, any of those things. So I think the whole agent identity thing is a big piece of the pie going into the future.
Yeah, I think benchmarking has to be like very granular, to your point, Cameron, and then also fluid to some degree, right? Like static coding benchmarks are kind of not very helpful, right? You see like models, crush this benchmark, but then you try to use it in the real world. It doesn't really do what you need to do. And I think coding is one of the easiest spaces because it's like inputs and outputs. You can see that very clearly. When it comes to compliance or legal or HR, these kinds of things, it's way more nuanced. I think there's going to be a lot more hurdles there, and evaluation frameworks are going to have to be very granular, like company specific. And then also fluid, like your policy change, like you have to update your benchmarks. So lot of things to do.
There's so much to discuss. I'm going to be up at the New York AI booth. If anyone wants to come talk about benchmarks and eval frameworks, it's a good place to be. But thank you all so much for joining.
Thanks, Cameron.
Thank you.